Hi everybody, welcome to another segment of OWA Live. We've got another interesting topic coming up, a lot of things that are in the news. We're facing another debt crisis here. This isn't the first time this has happened. This is a pretty typical thing, and going back to 1996, it feels like every couple of years we have some of these discussions. So let's talk about a little bit about what's going on, what's happening, and then taking that a little bit further, some of the recommended resolutions that are being floated. There have been some very interesting discussions, and we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of each one of those. So what is the debt ceiling crisis? The issue is that the United States government is still spending more money than it's bringing in. The national debt is continuing to go up. I think the most current target for those debts were like 32 trillion, 31.6 trillion or something like that. That debt limit was set in, I believe it was March of 2019. So it's been a little while since we've had some of these discussions, but now they're coming back up. Congress has the responsibility to do something about that. They can either cut budgets or they can increase the debt limit. Historically, they've always increased. That's always been how it's been done for the last 25 years. They just bump up the debt ceiling a little higher, a little higher, a little higher, and keep kicking that can down the road. There are some ideas that are being floated right now that I think are kind of interesting. So nothing's perfect. There are some good opportunities. There are some good strategies that are out there, but there are going to be drawbacks with everything that they do. So the most popular one that you may have heard of is a $1 trillion coin. This is a coin that's going to be minted by the U.S. Treasury, who has the responsibility to, for lack of a better term, create money. Their job is to send out money into the economy so that we've got adequate liquidity and people can buy things and the economy plugs along. So there has been a lot of discussion about utilizing a loophole where you could create a $1 trillion coin. You sell that to the Federal Reserve. There are some very complicated economics involved with that, but essentially that would provide another $1 trillion before we hit the debt ceiling again. In theory, this could be used quite frequently to increase our debt ceiling for as much as we want. Critics are kind of loud about this. First off, this isn't going to help anything with our inflation concern. Essentially, the Federal Reserve is just going to be sending another $1 trillion out into the world. And we know that that can cause some pretty nasty inflation concerns. Another big criticism of this is it's shifting power from Congress, who normally under the Constitution has the right to handle budget and things like that. It shifts some of that power to the executive branch, to the president, to the Federal Reserve, and to the Treasury, which there are all kinds of politics with that. So this probably won't happen, but for what it's worth, a lot of economists, some very decorated Harvard professionals, think that this might be a good idea. And while it's unprecedented, we've never had anything like this before, utilizing a $1 trillion platinum coin might be an interesting discussion. The second option that I've heard is actually being used in some other countries. So countries like the UK, they do what's called a premium bond. Now this is kind of interesting. I was reading up on this. A premium bond is kind of like a government-sanctioned lottery. You buy a bond, usually those bonds are issued at $1,000 par values, meaning you spend $1,000 to own this bond. The bond will owe some nominal amount of interest. So in the UK, they're paying like less than 3%. But what this does is every month there is a lottery drawing. You can win up to £1 million every month by buying these bonds. And what's interesting is UK residents, Englanders, are very, very into this. 2 out of 3 will buy these premium bonds to play the game. So that might be a way for the United States government to raise a little bit of money. Of course, the old classic is U.S. tax increases. This is the one nobody really wants to talk about. We think that this is going to happen. So we've been doing a lot of forecasting. If you've met with us in the last 6 to 12 months, you know that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is set to expire in 2026. I think that they're just going to kick the national debt ceiling. They'll figure it out eventually. They'll probably increase the debt ceiling again. But this will be addressed at some point in the future, and we likely will see some tax increases. But it's kind of fun to look at some of the other options that are out there. So if you hear someone talking about $1 trillion coin, that's what this is. If you hear about premium bonds or some kind of lottery system, that's what they're talking about here. There are a couple of other clever ideas. I like this. Anytime we have a crisis, this is where the brilliant minds start coming out and coming up with some very good ideas. Not saying that any one of these is going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, but hey, I like to read up on it. I like to geek out on this stuff. If you have any questions about the debt ceiling and what that's going to do to your portfolio, feel free to reach out to us. Give us a call and we'd be happy to get you scheduled. For this week's segment of OWA Live, thanks for joining me. Happy Bowtie Tuesday, and I'll see you next time for our next segment.